coming onto this trip, I thought I would have a little bit more of an understanding than many of my peers because as a Japanese major, I've already taken several culture classes. And for the most part, this was true. Many of the things that I saw my classmates get super excited about just didn't really affect me as much because I already knew that they would be there. However, this isn't to say that nothing surprised me while I was here. What was most surprising to me was the extent to which Japanese people will go out of their way to accommodate others, even foreigners, and the way that this helps preserve culture outside of the large protected sites that we went to see. Before I came on this trip, I watched an embarrassing amount of YouTube videos about what to do when you were in Japan, things not to do, places to see, and one of the things that these videos echoed was that a lot of Japanese people, especially older people, just really don't like foreigners and that you have to be prepared that some people might be mean. And while this may be true if you go to more rural areas, and while we did get a couple mean looks on the subways, most of the people we experienced were really nice. For example, there was English everywhere, and as a side note, the ways in which the English was written was actually super funny. At Shibuya 109, there was this staircase that had your misspelled over and over again. And although I didn't go to the Fuji trip, I was sent this picture of a sign where they talked about water, which was supposed to be the water cycle. And I'm really gonna suggest, if you haven't already seen this picture, to pause the video here and just look at it, because the more you look at it, the funnier it gets. I laughed at this picture for a good 5 minutes when I first saw it. And there were pictograms everywhere of things that were mainly common sense. Like when we went to a toilet room in Hakone, there was a pictogram of how to use the toilet, and it included one about not fishing. But who would do that? Regardless, all of these showed that Japanese people understand that as they move forward, Westerners are going to be in their country, and they're willing to put in the effort to break down the language barrier if we are as well. People were always giving us English menus at restaurants, and even if they weren't, they were willing to talk it out and try and find some understanding. When we saw street performers in Tokyo, they did most of their performance in English, despite saying that their English wasn't very good. But it was. It was surprisingly good. And they were willing to try because they understood that many of the people watching them were foreigners. This even spread to cats, which, as a cat lover, I really enjoyed. It seemed as if many of the feral cats had never met a mean person in their lives, and as such, they actually weren't very feral. In Nara, while I expected the deer to be friendly, I didn't expect to see a cat just chilling on top of a shrine. He seemed so unbothered by everything going on around him, despite the sizable group trying to take pictures of him, and was just enjoying his time in the sun. This also happened at Himeji. At the entrance, there was a group of about 5 cats that were greeting children and girls who really like cats, like me, to the grounds. They were super fat, super friendly, and super relaxed. It seemed like they just couldn't be fazed no matter how many large and loud tourist groups came by. It didn't seem like this was a new phenomenon either. At Fukagawa Edo Museum, they had a replica of an actual neighborhood cat on top of a roof, from the Edo period, and the guide had just as much to say about him as he did about any of the other exhibits. When I think about politeness culture in Japan, I think of cold businessmen jumping through hoops to give cards, and shop workers being overly respectful to people who think they have the right to be rude. And although this may exist at some level, in actuality, the culture is much larger and kinder than that. It's easy to see a culture that's so focused on being polite to those around you, and even has keigo built into their language to reflect this, as a culture that's cold and hard. And I think what surprised me most is actually seeing how untrue this is. On this note, I expected a lot of the important cultural sites to be absolutely exquisite, and I wasn't let down. There was always an area under reconstruction to make it look just as good as it once did. The grounds were impeccably maintained, always beautiful and clean. It looked like we could have been there when they were new. What was more surprising to me were small shrines, small areas of nature and culture within these huge cities that we visited. Who came to clean the grounds in a tiny shrine on the side of the road? Who tended to the bushes in a garden tucked away behind a bustling city? While there may be people whose jobs this is, much of the people we saw doing it were just normal people. When I would walk down the streets, we would see regular people and shop owners sweeping the streets. And at first I didn't quite understand it. Why sweep 1 or 2 leaves off the street in the middle of the day when they're just gonna fall back down? And why do it if it isn't your job? What I failed to realize at the time was that the beauty of Japan is something that a lot of people take a lot of pride in and want to do their part to upkeep. It's not done because somebody is forcing them to, and it's not done from a place of anger or malice. It's just done because they want to. They enjoy it, and they take pride in seeing it when it's done. In fact, at Musashi, one of the things that the professor said most surprised him when he moved into a Japanese residential area was that they took turns cleaning the communal trash collection area. Every once in a while, he would just see the stuff outside his door to clean it, and he would know it was his turn. He would do it for the week and pass it on. The culture of residential areas like this is one where you work together much more than in American areas, which is, while surprising, a really good way to do it. In my Japanese culture class, there was a small discussion one day about shrines that exist in urban areas and just how many shrines there are within Japan. However, the pictures in that PowerPoint showed tiny, run-down torii in corners that looked grimy and gross and not really anywhere you would want to go. My lived experience showed me that this couldn't be more wrong. While some may exist, the mall in Kyoto we were staying at had 7 individual shrines and temples, each of them impressive despite their size. They included mechanical animals that retrieved your fortune, large statues, and burning incense. Much more than any of the large sites we visited, it felt like people would actually come here to worship in their daily lives. In fact, at one of them, there were chairs set up for what I assume were some kind of worship or lesson. The hidden pockets of beauty and culture really caught me off guard in the best way possible. And thinking about the normal citizens and the effort that they have to put in to upkeep it is something that makes me respect them a lot. But overall, Japan is just another country, and while things might surprise us because we haven't lived it, it's not surprising to Japanese people. It's interesting to think about different countries and what their normal is, and also just how similar that is to our normal. Another thing that surprised me when I was on this trip is how much I felt like I was just at home. There were days when I could go through my routine and not have anything be different than when I was at home, which honestly shows that we're a lot closer than we might seem. This trip was really fun. I made a lot of friends, and I'm glad that I did it. And that's, I guess, my last unexpected thing. Although it doesn't really fit into the narrative, I couldn't do this project without talking about how close I got with everybody. I made some really, really good friendships that I think will last for a long time, and I wouldn't have had the chance to do it without coming on this trip. So for any future students or students who are considering doing the program, don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone, and don't be afraid to find something unexpected, because it's definitely worth it.